The maître d'hôtel looked at my hands before he looked at my face. I noticed it the way you notice a small cut, not immediately painful, but impossible to ignore once you see it. His eyes dropped to my fingers wrapped around the small gift bag I was carrying, and something shifted in his expression. Not disgust. Exactly. More like the practiced politeness of a man who has been told to solve a problem without making a scene. "Good evening, sir," he said. "Your name?" "Harold Mercer." I smiled. "I believe I'm under family." He ran his finger down the tablet screen with the slow deliberateness of someone who already knows what they're going to find. Or not find. The lobby of the Harrington Grand smelled like gardenias and money. The kind of money that doesn't announce itself loudly, but makes itself felt in the weight of the air conditioning and the softness of the carpet under your feet. I had driven 40 minutes to get here. I was wearing the gray sport coat Ruth had helped me pick out the Christmas before she passed. I had polished my shoes that afternoon, sitting on the back porch in the last of the October light. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer," the maitre d' said. "I don't see you on the guest list for the Whitmore-Caldwell engagement dinner." I stood very still. "The Whitmore-Caldwell," I repeated. "That's my son's engagement party. Daniel Mercer. I believe the reservation may be under his fiancée's family name." "Yes, sir. Miss Vanessa Caldwell and Mr. Daniel Mercer. I do have that reservation." He looked at me with something I can only describe as apologetic efficiency. "But the guest list was provided by the hosts, and your name isn't on it. I'm not able to seat you without authorization from one of the hosts." I looked past him into the restaurant. Through the tall glass partition, I could see round tables draped in ivory linen, candles in low crystal holders, flower arrangements that probably cost more than my truck payment, men in dark suits, women in cocktail dresses. I could see my son near the back of the room, standing beside a tall woman in a wine-red dress, Vanessa, his hand resting on the small of her back. He was laughing at something. He looked comfortable. He looked exactly like someone who belonged in that room. He did not look toward the entrance. "Could you let him know I'm here?" I asked. The maitre d' hesitated. "Of course." "Sir, would you mind waiting just a moment?" I waited. I set the gift bag down on the small marble ledge near the host stand, and I waited. There was a young woman to my left checking in. A couple, the woman's earrings alone probably cost what I made in a month back when I was working. I am 67 years old. I spent 39 years as a Finnish carpenter. I built staircases and crown moldings and custom cabinetry for homes that looked a lot like the inside of the Harrington Grand. I never once sat at a table inside one of them. That was fine. That was always fine. What happened next was not fine. My son appeared at the partition doorway. Not rushing, walking at the measured pace of a man who is calculating each step. He was wearing a charcoal suit I had never seen before, a pale blue tie. He looked good. He looked like the version of himself he had been working toward for 15 years. "Dad." He kept his voice low. "Hey, son." I reached out to shake his hand. He took it briefly, the way you shake a stranger's hand. "Looks like there was a mix-up with the list." There wasn't a mix-up. He glanced over his shoulder. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you react." I waited. "Vanessa's family is here tonight. Her father's partners. Some clients. It's important for her. Professionally. For both of us." He paused. "You know I love you, Dad, but tonight isn't the right setting. I am not a man who shows things quickly on his face. Ruth used to say I had a poker face that could win at Vegas. What I felt in that moment was a specific kind of cold, not anger. Not yet. More like the feeling of stepping onto ice you thought was solid and hearing it crack beneath your weight. "Not the right setting," I said. "You know how Vanessa's family is. It's a professional crowd. And you!" He glanced at my hands. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I just need tonight to go smoothly. That's all this is. I looked at my son. I had held this man when he was 3 hours old. I had taught him to drive in the parking lot of the old Kmart, off Route 9. I had sat beside his mother's hospital bed for 11 weeks. And when she passed on a Tuesday morning in February 4 years ago, it was my son who I called first, before the nurses even had time to pull the curtain. "You're asking me to leave," I said. "I'm asking you to understand. He reached out and squeezed my arm briefly. The way you reassure someone before delivering bad news. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll do dinner. Just the three of us. I picked up the small gift bag from the ledge. Inside it was a card Ruth and I had started buying years ago. The kind with watercolor flowers on the front. The kind she always signed both our names on, even when she was too weak to hold a pen herself. I had written inside it the morning before the party, at the kitchen table with my coffee. I had written that I was proud of him. I had written that his mother would have been proud too. I handed it to him. "Give this to yourself," I said. "From your mother." Then I turned and walked back out through the glass doors into the October night. I sat in my truck for a long time. The parking lot of the Harrington Grand is designed for valet. There's a small secondary lot on the east side that regular people use. I had parked there between a 10-year-old Honda and a landscaping truck with a broken taillight. I rolled down the window. The air smelled like cut grass and diesel and the distant wood smoke of someone's fireplace, and I just sat with that for a while. I am not a man who cries easily. I cried the night Ruth died. I cried at her funeral, quietly, with my hand covering my mouth. I did not cry in the parking lot of the Harrington Grand. But I want to be honest with you. I came close, not because my son had turned me away. Men disappoint each other. That is an old and terrible fact. I came close because of his eyes when he looked at my hands. Those hands built the back porch where I had polished my shoes that afternoon. Those hands built the crib my son slept in as a baby, still sitting in my garage because he had never come to collect it. Those hands had held his mother's hand for 11 weeks in a hospital room while machines breathed for her, and they had not looked anything but right to me in that moment. I drove home. The house was quiet the way a house gets when you've lived in it alone for 4 years. I had built most of it myself, not all. I want to be accurate about that. The foundation was poured by a crew I hired. The framing was done with help from my old friend Frank, who had a bad back even then, and spent most of the time handing me lumber and telling me I was measuring wrong. But the finish work, the trim, the doors, the built-in bookshelves in the living room that Ruth called her favorite thing she had ever owned, that was all mine. I changed out of the gray sport coat and hung it up carefully. I made a cup of tea. I didn't drink. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one angled toward the backyard, and I thought about money. Here is something I need to explain. My son is not a poor man. He works in commercial real estate. He drives a car I could not name the model of, because I have never paid attention to the names of cars that cost $80,000. He lives in a house in Westfield with 4 bedrooms and a kitchen that was featured in a local design magazine. He is, by any reasonable measure, successful. But 18 months ago, he came to me with a problem. He and his business partner had over-leveraged on a development deal that went sideways. The short version is that he needed a bridge loan, something to hold the business together while they restructured. Not a small amount. He needed $250,000, and he needed it within 30 days. I want to be clear about something. That money was not sitting in a savings account. That money was 39 years of putting 10% of every paycheck into a retirement fund that Frank, who spent 20 years as a loan officer before he retired, had helped me manage carefully. It was Ruth's life insurance payout. It was the proceeds from selling her mother's house after her mother passed. It was the money I had told myself, quietly, that I would leave to my grandchildren someday. I gave it to my son, not as a loan. That was his word. He wrote me a promissory note on paper he printed off his office computer, signed it, dated it, handed it to me with the confident efficiency of a man who fully intends to repay something. I did not tell him what I actually felt, which was that I did not care about being repaid. I gave it because he needed it. I gave it because he was my son. I gave it the same way I had given him everything else without keeping score. The promissory note was in a folder in my filing cabinet under the letter M. I thought about that folder while I sat in my armchair. Then I called Frank. Frank answered on the second ring, which meant he had been awake, which meant his back was bothering him again. "How was the party?" he asked. I told him. There was a long silence. Frank is not a man who fills silences. He is 71, retired, widowed 3 years before Ruth passed. He has a daughter in Portland who calls every Sunday, and a son in Atlanta who calls when he needs something. He understands certain kinds of situations without needing them explained. The note, he said finally. Yes. What do you want to do? I looked out the window at the dark backyard. There was a birdhouse I had built this spring, after Ruth died, something to do with my hands in the early mornings, when the house was too quiet. A pair of bluebirds had taken up residence in April and left in September. The birdhouse was empty now. Nothing tonight, I said. I just needed to say it out loud. All right. He paused. Harold, yeah, you're not going to let this go. No, I said. I slept better than I expected to. There's something clarifying about a decision, even before you know exactly what the decision is. My grandson called me the next morning. He is 12 years old. He is my son's child, from his first marriage, which ended when my grandson was 4, and he lives primarily with his mother but spends every other weekend with his father, and has been spending Friday nights with me since he was 6, because his father works late on Fridays and his mother has a standing commitment. And I am, apparently, the most reliable option. This arrangement had started as logistics and had become, over the years, something I would not trade for anything. Grandpa, he said, were you at the party last night? I paused. For a minute, Dad said you left early. Something like that. He was quiet in the way kids are quiet when they know something isn't right but don't have the vocabulary for it yet. He is a serious boy. He likes woodworking. I have been teaching him since he was 8, starting with sanding and working up to simple joinery. He has a patience for it that surprises me. Most kids want to rush to the finished thing. He likes the process. Are you okay? He asked, 12 years old. And he asked me that. I'm fine, buddy, I said. You want to come over Saturday? I'm cutting those shelf brackets we talked about. Yeah, he said. I want to do the router this time. We'll see about the router. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long moment. The morning light was coming through the window above the sink at a low angle, the way it does in October, casting long shadows across the counter. Ruth had picked out that countertop. Butcher block. She had wanted soapstone and I had talked her out of it because I didn't think I could install it myself, and she had said fine. Butcher block is warmer anyway, and she had been right. I went to my filing cabinet and took out the folder labeled M. The promissory note was straightforward. $250,000, repayable within 5 years at 3% interest. My son had made 4 payments in the first 6 months, modest, but consistent. Then the payments had stopped. That was 11 months ago. He had not mentioned it since. Neither had I. I called my son at 9:30 in the morning. He answered with the careful neutrality of a man who had been expecting the call and had prepared for it. Dad, I was going to call you today. Were you? About last night. I'm not calling about last night, I said. I'm calling about the note. Silence. I need to understand where we stand, I said. The last payment I received was 11 months ago. The 5-year term ends in March. I'd like to sit down and talk about your plan for the remaining balance. His voice changed, not angry, careful. Dad, you know the situation with the Belmore project. I explained all of that. Things are tighter than I expected right now. I understand that. I'd still like to meet. Another pause. Of course. We'll figure this out. You know I'm good for it. I know you intend to be, I said. I'll let you get back to your morning. I hung up. I want to be precise about something. What I was doing was not revenge in any ugly sense. I was not trying to destroy my son. I had no interest in watching him fail. What I had wanted, I realized, standing in that lobby with my polished shoes and my gray sport coat, was for him to understand the weight of what he held. Not just the money, the weight of a person. Frank came over that afternoon. We sat on the back porch with coffee, and he brought a folder of his own statements, projections, some paperwork he had prepared with methodical care that told the story of what $250,000 looked like when invested properly over the same period, versus what a promissory note at 3% looked like when the payments stopped. He needs the Belmore project to close, Frank said. From what you've told me, that deal has 2 investors. Your son and his partner. Yes, and they need clear financing to close. That's my understanding. Frank looked at me over the rim of his coffee mug. So the question is, whether you call the note. Calling the note meant notifying my son that the full balance was due immediately, which he could not pay, which would complicate the Belmore deal significantly, which would, in practical terms, force a conversation that had been avoided for 11 months. I'm not calling the note, I said. Frank raised an eyebrow. Not yet. I want to meet with him. In person. And I want Vanessa there. He thought about that. Why Vanessa? Because she was there last night, I said. And because she needs to be part of this conversation, if she's going to be part of this family. My son agreed to dinner the following Thursday. He suggested a restaurant. I suggested my house. After a brief negotiation that I did not engage in, I simply waited. They came to my house. I cooked. This is something people who knew me before Ruth passed away might find surprising. I was not a cook when she was alive. She cooked. I cleaned up. But in the 4 years since, I had taught myself out of necessity and discovered that I liked it the same way I liked woodworking, the same reasons: patience, attention to process, the satisfaction of a finished thing. I made pot roast with root vegetables. I made cornbread from Ruth's recipe, the one written in her handwriting on an index card I keep in the kitchen drawer. I set the table properly, with the good plates Ruth had inherited from her mother. They arrived at 6:30. My son was in his business casual dress pants, open collar. Vanessa was in a silk blouse and heeled boots. She looked around my kitchen with the politely composed expression of someone cataloging their surroundings. Something smells amazing, my son said, and he meant it. Whatever else was complicated between us, he was not pretending about the food. We ate. I did not bring up the note over dinner. I asked Vanessa about her family's business. Her father ran a commercial development firm, which I already knew but wanted her to talk about. She talked about it. She was intelligent. She was composed. She was very good at managing the temperature of a room. After dinner, after I had cleared the plates and poured coffee, I brought out the folder. My son's posture changed immediately. "Dad," he said. "Let me finish," I said quietly. "Then you can say whatever you want." I laid it out simply. The original amount, the payment history, the gap, the remaining balance, $218,000, the timeline to maturity. Vanessa looked at my son. It was a careful look, the look of a person recalibrating. "You told me that was settled," she said. My son opened his mouth and then closed it. "I want to be clear," I said. "I did not give that money to your father expecting it back at a particular pace. I gave it because he needed it, and because I am his father, and because that is what fathers do." I paused. What I did not expect was to be told I was not appropriate to attend his engagement party. The kitchen was very quiet. "The money and last Friday are not the same conversation," I continued. "I know that, but they are connected. And I think the connection is this. When people believe that something costs nothing, they stop treating it with care. The money costs something. 39 years of work and a lot of careful choices cost something." I looked at my son. "I cost something. Your mother cost something. The fact that I have grease under my fingernails and she had flour on her hands for most of her life that costs something too." My son's jaw was tight. His eyes were bright. "I'm not asking you to apologize in a particular format," I said. "I'm not asking you to feel embarrassed in front of Vanessa. I'm asking you to see me, the way I've seen you, your whole life." The silence stretched out. Vanessa spoke first. "What you did on Friday was wrong." She said it to my son, not to me. Her voice was level, precise. "I didn't know he was coming. I want to say that clearly. I knew you hadn't sent an invitation, but I assumed that was a scheduling issue. I did not know you'd asked him to leave." My son looked at her. Then he looked at me. "I was ashamed," he said. "That's the honest answer. Vanessa's father has been the expectations in her family are." He stopped. He ran his hand across the back of his neck, the gesture he has made since he was a teenager when he is trying to find words for something true. "I wanted to be the version of myself they see, and I thought he stopped again. "You thought I reminded you of who you used to be," I said. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Son," I said, "who you used to be is worth remembering. I want to tell you about the workshop. In the back of my house, past the kitchen and the laundry room, there is a door that leads to the attached workshop Ruth always called my other living room. It is not large. 2 workbenches, a tool wall, a table saw, a router table, a drill press, sawdust in every crack of the floor no matter how often I sweep it, the smell of wood, pine, oak, cherry, walnut, has worked itself so deeply into the walls that I think it would outlast the house itself. On the wall above the main bench, there is a shelf I built when my son was 7 years old. I built it with him, or rather, I built it and he handed me things and asked questions constantly and told me that the saw was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. On the shelf there is a carved wooden box Ruth asked me to make for their anniversary the year they were married. Inside the box is nothing of particular value. A few coins, a pressed flower, a small folded note in my son's handwriting that says, simply, "I made this for Grandpa," which he wrote when he was 9, and which I put in the box and never told him I kept. That Thursday evening, after we had talked through everything, after my son had said what he needed to say, and I had said what I needed to say, and Vanessa had made several observations that were pointed and fair, and that I respected her for, I brought them into the workshop. I showed it to them the way you show someone the place that holds the truest version of a life. Vanessa stood at the workbench and touched the surface of the cherry wood I had been milling for the past 2 weeks. A dining table I was building, slowly, as a project, because I like having a project. She looked at the grain of the wood, the way the light moved across it. "It's beautiful," she said, and she meant it. I could tell the difference. My son stood in front of the tool wall and looked at it for a long time. I have had most of those tools since before he was born. Some of them were his grandfather's. He knows their names. He grew up in this workshop, or in the one before this house. He used to sleep in here in a portable crib when he was an infant, so that Ruth could nap and I could work and we could all be in the same orbit. "I forgot," he said quietly. He wasn't talking to me specifically. I forgot all of this. "It's still here," I said. "There is more to say and less to say." We agreed on a repayment schedule that was structured fairly. Frank helped me draft it. Something with actual legal standing. Vanessa's father, as it turned out, had a daughter who was better at the details of these things than my son had given her credit for. She reviewed the schedule. She had suggestions. They were good suggestions. We incorporated them. The Belmore deal closed in January. My son called to tell me before he called anyone else. I was in the workshop when the phone rang 8 in the morning. My grandson beside me at the second bench, learning to use a block plane with the focused patience that still surprises me. I stepped outside to take the call. "We closed," my son said. His voice was tired and relieved, and something else, something younger. "We actually closed." "Congratulations," I said. "Dad." He paused. "I want to start over. With you. With Vanessa. I want to do this right. That's all I've wanted," I said. "The wedding is planned for June. I know because Vanessa called me herself 2 weeks after that dinner and asked if I would be willing to build something for their new home, a piece of furniture, whatever I thought fit. I told her I would build them a dining table, the cherry one I had been working on. She sent me the room dimensions. She asked about the finish. She asked, specifically, whether there would be visible grain or whether I would sand it smooth. I told her I leave the grain visible. Every table I build, you can read the wood. You can see where the tree grew slow and where it grew fast, where it turned toward the light, where it endured a hard season. "I like that," she said. My grandson was at my side when I cut the first pieces. He had his safety glasses on. He asked 12 questions in the first 10 minutes, as he always does, and I answered every one. At some point in the middle of the morning, while the table saw ran and the sawdust rose and settled in the cool air of the workshop, he looked up at me from behind his glasses. "Are things okay with Dad now?" he asked. I turned off the saw. I looked at him, this boy with his serious eyes and his patience that came from somewhere I like to believe I gave him. "We're working on it," I said. "That's what families do." He thought about this seriously, in the way he thinks about all things. "Like the table," he said. I looked at the pieces laid out on the bench. The raw wood, unfinished. All the work still ahead of it. All the shape it was going to become. Yeah, I said. Like the table. I put my hand briefly on his shoulder, and then I restarted the saw, and we kept working.